The alien exploration team arrived on the human research ship with high expectations but low concern. The crew from the planet Urvax had met many species before, but none as soft-looking as humans. They were smaller, smiled too much, and always bowed or said sorry, even when nothing bad had happened. Their ship was clean, their uniforms tidy, and their voices calm. Captain Velk of the Urvax delegation watched them closely, waiting for something unusual, something threatening. But instead of weapons or warriors, the humans brought fruit, tea, and polite conversation. They talked about stars and science, about peace and unity. Not once did they mention power, combat, or strength. Velk whispered to his second officer, "They are herbivores, maybe even prey species." The others laughed quietly. To them, this was not a dangerous visit. It was entertainment. That evening, the human crew invited the Urvax to their mess hall for a cultural dinner. The room was large, warm, and filled with the smell of cooked plants. Breads, steamed vegetables, and something called tofu were on display. Music played softly in the background, and humans talked happily. Captain Velk looked around and nodded with a small smile. "Even their food is soft," he said. Then the room changed. A door at the back opened. One human stepped in late. He was tall, wearing a black jacket with sleeves rolled up, hands stained with something dark, carried a flat metal container. As he walked toward the main table, everyone grew quiet. Velk's eyes narrowed. The human set the container down, opened it, and inside was a raw red piece of meat, thick, bloody, and pulsing with smell. Not cooked, not processed, just fresh and wet. The alien guest froze in place. The human didn't say a word. He picked up the steak with his bare hands, lifted it to his mouth, and bit straight into it. Blood ran down his fingers. His teeth tore through the meat like a predator. And all the while, his eyes locked onto Captain Velk. No emotion, no smile, just hunger. For a few long seconds, no one moved. Velk's heart pounded in his chest. The room was too silent. The music had stopped. The air felt heavier. The humans didn't stop him. They didn't seem shocked. Some even looked proud. One of them leaned toward Velk and whispered, "That's Jackson. He prefers it raw." Velk turned slowly to look at her. "Why?" he asked, trying to sound calm. She smiled, but it wasn't a soft smile. It was something sharper, because that's how his ancestors ate it. Back when they had to chase it down first. Velk sat back, suddenly aware of how thin his own skin felt. He remembered the human dental scans, strong jaws, dual teeth, built for tearing and grinding. Not prey, not soft, predators and polite skin. Jackson wiped his hand on a napkin and walked out without a word. The room returned to normal. Music started again. Laughter resumed, but it was forced now. The aliens kept glancing toward the door, as if expecting him to return. Velk didn't touch his plate. He couldn't. The smell of steamed greens now made his stomach twist. He looked at the other humans, quiet, smiling, peaceful. But now, he saw something else in their eyes. Something deep, something hidden. He realized a terrible truth. They weren't pretending to be peaceful. They were just not hungry yet, Captain. Velk could not sleep. The image of the human biting into raw meat stayed in his mind like a nightmare that refused to fade. His scientists had told him humans were peaceful, social creatures. They built cities, explored space, and studied the stars. But now Velk began to wonder what those same scientists had missed. The next morning, he ordered a full review of human biology, especially their mouths. Within hours, the Urvax science team pulled up data from human archives. What they found made them all go quiet. The human jaw was strong, far stronger than expected for their size. Their teeth were a mix, flat ones for grinding plants, but also sharp canines designed to tear meat. They even had bite force records from ancient times, where humans used only stone tools and their jaws to bring down prey. What file showed? Early humans hunting mammoths with spears, and sometimes just running them off cliffs. Velk stared at the screen and whispered, "This is not prey. This is a species that eats both the forest and the hunter. While the scientists tried to explain it away as evolution, Velk knew what he had seen last night was no old instinct. It was current, real, alive, and it wasn't just Jackson. Velk noticed the human crew acted strange around meat. They didn't fear it, they respected it, like it was something ancient and powerful. He decided to watch closer, quietly. That's when he saw a group of humans walking toward the training hall. He followed at a distance, curious. Inside, the humans were running, lifting heavy things, and fighting each other not out of anger, but for practice. One woman, small and calm, threw a man twice her size to the ground and smiled as he groaned. Another team practiced with sticks, hitting with shocking speed and precision. Velk stayed in the shadows, watching every move. They didn't just train their bodies. They trained to hunt. Then one of the humans noticed him and waved. "Commander Velk, come watch the simulation." Velk walked over slowly. A large screen showed a forest scene, trees, rocks, and a creature running fast. It looked alien. The human labeled LT Sura was the hunter in the sim she chased. The creature down, set a trap, and waited. When the creature stepped forward, a spike snapped upward, not killing it, just wounding it. Then Sura ran in and finished it with a blade. When the sim ended, she smiled proudly. "That's how we did it before guns. Clean, fast, honorable." Velk stared at the screen, then at her. "You mean this history?" She nodded. "Yes. We used to track prey for days. No tech, just instinct and endurance." She offered him a drink, casually. "Want something cold?" Velk shook his head. His throat felt dry. All this time he thought humans survived by being clever. Now he saw something worse. They were clever and built to kill. That evening, Velk wrote a private message to the High Council of Airvacs. In it, he did not mention weapons or military power. He spoke only of teeth, eyes, and hunger. "We assumed the human smile was a sign of peace," he wrote. "But now I believe it was something else. It shows their teeth." He ended the message with a warning. "They say they are peaceful, but their biology does not lie. They are predators. They are just wearing a friendly mask." When he hit, Velk sat back and listened to the soft hum of the ship. Somewhere far down the hall, he heard someone laughing. It was not a loud laugh, but it had an edge. And for the first time since arriving, Velk wished he was back home. 3 days after the dinner, something unexpected happened. A supply ship from the human side was delayed. The Airvacs and humans were now stuck with limited food. The alien kitchen systems could not process local plants, and their protein packs were almost empty. At first, the aliens panicked quietly, holding emergency meetings. But before anyone could suggest rationing, the human captain, a calm woman named Della, made an announcement over the comms. "To all crew, we will share our food. No one goes hungry." The aliens were surprised, but also relieved. Maybe the humans really were as peaceful as they claimed. That relief didn't last long. When the shared meals began, the humans opened. Storage units the Airvacs had never seen before, sealed crates marked with red warnings, and frost still clinging to the metal. Inside were thick slabs of frozen meat, not lab-grown, not synthetic, real. Muscles, fat, bone. The smell was strong. Too strong? Some aliens had to leave the room immediately. Velk watched in silence as the humans prepared their meals. They spoke, casually laughing as they rubbed spices and oils into the meat. One human told another, "Smells just like home," while another said, "I miss this." Protein hits different when it's earned. Aliens who stayed didn't touch anything. They sat with small bites of bread or grain paste. But the humans devoured their food like wolves that had been waiting too long. They didn't act like starving people. They acted like they'd been holding back. That night, Velk walked down a dim corridor, unable to sleep again. What? Something about the humans' behavior unsettled him. They didn't panic when food ran low. They became calmer, focused, as if hunger brought something out in them. He followed a faint sound near the docking bay and spotted 2 humans putting on armor. Not war armor, but survival gear. They carried rifles and long blades. Curious, Velk stepped closer and asked, "Where are you going?" One of them, a man named Briggs, grinned. "Supply run. We saw signs of local animal life near the ice cliffs. Could be food." Velk blinked. "You're going to hunt?" Briggs nodded. "It's what we do. No big deal." So then he added with a smile, "Besides, if we don't hunt, we get." Cranky Velk watched them leave the ship. Silent warning echoed in his mind. Don't let them get hungry. 2 hours later, one of the younger aliens, a curious technician named Oral, decided to follow the humans using a hidden observation drone. What he saw shook him to his core. The humans didn't just hunt, they moved. Like shadows. Coordinated. Patient. They tracked a large four-legged creature through the snow, communicating with hand signals, not words. When the creature tried to run, one human climbed a cliff without hesitation, leaped down, and brought it down with a blade. The kill was fast, clean. Then they smiled, nodding cruelty and satisfaction. As if this was a part of who they were. When Oral returned, pale and shaking, he found Velk and showed him the footage. Velk watched in silence. No alien on this station could hunt like that. Not with joy, not with instinct, not with that focus. Velk turned to Oral and said in a quiet voice, "Don't tell the others, not yet." Oral nodded quickly. Later in the mess hall, the humans returned, carrying fresh meat. They were smiling, laughing, covered in ice and blood. They tossed one piece onto the grill, and the smell filled the air once more. Want alien nearby gagged. The humans didn't notice. Or maybe they didn't care. Velk didn't move, just stared at them from the shadows. And once again, that old terrible thought returned. These creatures had called themselves explorers, scientists, friends. But now he knew the truth. Humans were hunters. They were just pretending to be civilized. And the worst part, they were good at pretending. The distress signal came in during the second sleep cycle. Intervac's cargo ship had crashed on a frozen moon not far from the joint station.
Alk was still reviewing human hunting footage when the call arrived.
The transmission was weak and broken, but clear enough to understand one thing. Survivors were trapped, and something was out there with them. The aliens prepared a search party, but most of their rescue equipment had been damaged in the last solar flare. Before Velk could request help, Captain Della of the human crew volunteered her team. "We've trained for this," she said calmly. "Let us lead." Velk wanted to protest, but part of him was relieved. The humans didn't fear danger. In fact, it seemed to sharpen them. The shuttle landed on the frozen moon in silence. Winds howled. Snow blasted sideways. Visibility was low, but the humans moved quickly, checking gear, weapons, and survival. Kit's Velk joined them with a few Ervax engineers. The crash site was in a narrow valley, already half buried in snow. The wreckage glowed faintly under the ice-blue sky, but something was wrong. Claw marks were on the outer hull, long, deep, and too wide to be natural. One of the alien survivors, barely conscious, whispered, "It came at night. It watches us. It drags us away."
Ow.
Then he passed out. Velk felt his heart race. Della narrowed her eyes and ordered her team into formation. "We're being hunted," she said, calm as ever. "Time to return the favor." The rescue mission turned into something else, a trap for the predator. The humans didn't panic. They set motion sensors, baited with old meat, and dug defensive trenches in the snow. Velk watched in silence. This was not training. This was instinct. When night came, the wind stopped suddenly. Too suddenly. The moon fell into a strange silence. And then they heard it, footsteps crunching slowly across the ice, heavy, deliberate. Della signaled her team to stay low. The humans waited in complete stillness. No chatter, no fear. Velk and his group stayed behind cover, hearts pounding. Then the creature appeared. Tall, thin, almost invisible in the snow, with glowing eyes and razor claws. It moved toward the bait, sniffing. Just as it bent down to feed, One of the humans whistled. The creature turned, and the trap exploded. Flashes of light, fire, and sharp sound cracked the night open. The creature roared and charged, but it was already too late. The humans moved in fast and without hesitation. One leapt onto its back, blade in hand, and drove it deep into the spine. Out. The creature howled once and collapsed. Blood poured across the ice. Silence returned. Velk stared in disbelief. The human stood over the body, breathing hard but steady. Jackson, the same one, who had bitten into the raw steak, crouched beside the corpse. He ran his hand across the blood, sniffed it, and grinned. "Not bad," he said. "Smells like elk." Another human laughed. "Too lean, but I'd grill it." They weren't joking. Not entirely. Velk turned away, trying to steady himself. These weren't just survivors. These were predators, ones who smiled while covered in blood. The next morning, the aliens salvaged what they could from the ship. The humans helped, silent but focused. No boasting. No celebration. They had done what they came for and were ready to move on. On the way back, Velk sat alone in the shuttle. Across from him, Della cleaned her weapon with slow, practiced care. He stared at her hands, steady, calm, deadly. She looked up and said softly, "Don't worry, Commander. We're your friends." Velk nodded, but inside he felt a cold deeper than the snow outside. Friends, yes, but only if they stayed fed. Only if the blood stayed frozen. Because he now understood humans didn't just survive the wild, they ruled it. And if something bigger ever came hunting, the humans wouldn't run. They'd smile and sharpen their blades. After the rescue on the frozen moon, the human crew returned to the station with smiles on their faces and blood still on their boots. The alien survivors were safe, though shaken, and the damaged cargo ship was left behind. Commander Velk had hoped the humans would rest, maybe take time to reflect on what happened, but instead they began preparing something unusual, a celebration. They called it the feast. Captain Della announced it over the comms. "Mission success. Tonight we eat together." The Urvax crew was invited, though many were unsure. Velk felt uneasy but knew it would be disrespectful to decline. That evening, the mess hall was different. The humans had decorated it with lights and colors. Music was louder, the voices more cheerful, and the smell stronger. Grills lined one side of the room. Smoke rose into the vents. Meat fresh and sizzling popped and hissed over open flames. Some of it was from their storage, but other cuts were clearly from the creature they had killed. Velk's nose twitched. The scent was sharp like iron, heat, and fire. Most of the Urvax crew sat in the corner, staring in silence. Plates were pushed in front of them, full of vegetables and simple bread. But the center table was full of meat, spices, bones, and fire. And the humans gathered there like it was a holy place. Jackson stood up, raised a cup, and shouted to the hunt. The others cheered and drank, and they told stories. Not of technology or science, but of past hunts. One human described chasing a bear through mountains. Another talked about fishing with bare hands in frozen rivers. Della told a story about her great-grandmother, who once fought off a wolf with a stick. Each story ended with laughter, clapping, or a loud bite of food. It was strange. These were not warriors bragging. They were remembering something deeper, older, more primal. When one young Urvax asked why they hunted instead of using lab food, a human simply said, "Because we remember where we come from." Then another added, "And it tastes better when you've earned it." Velk tried to remain calm, but his hands were shaking under the table. Suddenly the room grew quiet. A new dish was brought out, thick dark meat with a golden crust. One human whispered, "That's the moon beast. We call this victory steak." The Urvax guests looked horrified. They had rules about what could be eaten, and this was far outside them. But the humans showed no shame. They cut the meat shared it and smiled as they ate. Jackson leaned back, chewing slowly, and said, "It's not about killing. It's about surviving. And sometimes, celebrating it." Velk stood up slowly and left the room. No one stopped him. Outside, in the quiet corridor, he breathed deeply and stared at the cold walls. These people were not just explorers. There was something older wearing a uniform, a memory of the wild. A piece of earth that still remembered the jungle and the hunt. Later that night, Velk stood by the observation window. Through the glass, he saw Earth in the distance, blue, calm, and beautiful. But now he looked at it differently. It was not just a world of peace and oceans. It was a training ground. A place where predators had once hunted in packs, where hunger shaped minds and muscle, and the humans. They carried that history inside them, smiling, friendly, but under the skin something sharp waited, something that would not go away. Velk turned as the music inside the mess hall grew louder again. Laughter, flames, meat. He shivered and whispered to himself, "They are not what we thought. They never were." And deep down, he feared the day they might stop pretending. The station felt different now. The air was still the same, the lights the same, but the silence between the alien crew was heavy. They no longer walked past humans. Without nervous glances, whispers followed them down corridors. Urvax were no longer sure if they were guests or prey. Commander Velk tried to keep order, but the fear had already spread. One night, he made a decision. He sent a private message to Captain Della and asked to speak. Not on the bridge, not in public, but alone. She agreed without hesitation. The meeting room was quiet, with only the soft hum of the station's systems in the background. Della entered calmly, wearing no weapons, just her usual black uniform. Velk stood near the window, hands behind his back, pretending to be at ease. "Captain," he began slowly, "we have questions. Not about your science or missions, about your nature." Della raised an eyebrow, but said nothing. Velk turned to face her. "Why do you hide what you are?" She smiled gently. "And what do you think we are, Commander?" Hesitated, then said, "Predators. Hunters. Not peaceful as you first." Appeared. Della nodded, as if she had been expecting this question all along. "You're right," she said. "We are predators. Every human carries that history in their blood." She sat down across from him. "But we are also thinkers, builders. We have laws and art and peace." "Yes, but only because we learned to hold the beast inside." Velk leaned forward, trying to understand. "Why pretend to be harmless? Why hide the hunger?" Della looked directly into his eyes. "Because we have to. If we didn't, we would terrify the stars." For a long moment, neither of them spoke. Then she continued, voice calm but cold. "We learned long ago that showing teeth scares people. So we smile, we share food, we build stations like this. But deep down, we are the same species that hunted in darkness with stone knives and fire." Velk's hands trembled. "What if you ever stop pretending?" Della's smile faded. "Then the galaxy will remember why Earth was called the Death World." She stood, turned to leave, then paused. "You saw Jackson eat raw meat. You saw us hunt. That wasn't us being violent. That was us being comfortable." She looked over her shoulder and said softly, "Be more afraid when we're hungry," and still smiling. After she left, Velk stayed in the room for a long time, alone with his thoughts. He now understood something terrible. Humans didn't bring weapons because they didn't need them. They were the weapons. Their bodies were tools of survival. Their minds were shaped by ancient struggle. They could be polite and gentle, but only because they had mastered the beast inside. If that beast ever woke up fully, there would be no warning, no mercy. The next day, Velk met with his top advisors and told them to update all Urvax files on humanity. "They are not plant eaters," he said. "They are the apex species, the top." One advisor asked, "Should we fear them?" Velk didn't answer at first. Then he whispered, "Only if they ever stop smiling." Back in the human section, Jackson sat with a group of his crew, laughing and telling stories. Someone asked about the frozen moon. He shrugged and said, "It was cold. We found the beast. Found us. We won." The others chuckled.
Oh.
Handed him a piece of dried meat. Jackson bit into it slowly, eyes focused, and just for a second, only a second, his smile faded, replaced by something older, something hungry, something wild. Then it returned. That simple human smile. But now, everyone who had seen behind it knew what lived beneath. Weeks passed, but the memory of the hunt, the feast, and the quiet warnings never faded from the minds of the Urvax crew. The humans returned to their usual routine, polite, helpful, curious. They helped with repairs, shared data, and even taught music classes to the younger aliens. But something had changed. The Urvax no longer laughed at their soft appearance or peaceful words. They watched the humans differently now, with quiet respect and quiet fear. Velk sat alone in his quarters reading the final reports from his science team. The humans had passed every test of diplomacy, intelligence, and cooperation. On paper, they were ideal allies. But no one could forget the moment a man calmly ate raw meat with a steady gaze, or how easily they tracked a predator across ice, or how they stood in firelight holding blades like it was home, as Velk closed the report and looked out at the stars. "We were warned," he whispered. "We just didn't see it." A final joint meeting was held before the Urvax were scheduled to return home. The Alien Council stood in formation, ready to give thanks for the peaceful exchange. Della and her human officers stood opposite them, clean uniforms, relaxed smiles. Everything looked perfect. The speeches began, filled with formal words and future promises. Velk was the last to speak. He walked to the center and looked straight at the humans. "At first," he said slowly, "we believed you were plant-eaters, harmless, soft." A few aliens stirred nervously behind him. "But we now understand something deeper. You chose peace. You were not born from it. You came from the wild, and you carry it still." Della gave a small nod but said nothing. Velk continued, "The smile. It is not weakness. It is warning." The room went quiet. Della stepped forward. She did not raise her voice. "You're right, Commander. We smile because we have seen what happens when we stop. You do not want to meet the human who smiles while starving." She turned to the room. "Our ancestors were not diplomats. They were survivors. And Earth was not gentle. It trained us well." And she gave a final bow. "Let peace be our choice. But let respect be your reason." The ceremony ended with polite applause, but the words echoed long after. When the Urvax ship departed, the crew stayed silent for hours. One young officer finally asked Velk, "Do you think we made a mistake?" Velk looked at the stars and answered, "No, but we now know the truth. Humans are not peaceful because they are weak. They are peaceful because they are strong enough to choose it." He paused, then added, "But we must never make them prove it." Back on the human ship, the crew gathered one last time in the mess hall. There was no feast this time, only quiet talk and soft music. Jackson sat at the corner, sharpening a blade, not because he needed to, but because it felt right. Someone asked him, "Do you think they finally understand?" He smirked. "Maybe. Doesn't matter. We'll smile either way." Della stood nearby, holding a datapad. She looked up and said, "One day, another species might forget. They might think we're soft again." Jackson looked up. "Then we'll remind them. One steak at a time."
Ice?
They laughed. Not loud, not cruel, just calm and honest. And out. In the cold dark of space, the Urvax carried with them a sealed file marked not with warnings, but with one line written in bold universal code. If a human ever stops smiling, leave. Because in the end, they understood the truth. Too late. The most dangerous predator isn't the one with claws or fangs. It's the one who hunts with a grin and waits for you to call it harmless.